At the time, I was working as a safety investigator at a sprawling industrial complex for heavy manufacturing. The place was huge, and plenty of people handled safety incidents. But I was the only one whose job was to investigate them from start to finish and write up the reports for management. And in heavy industry, when things go wrong, they go fatally wrong. The last 2 weeks had been a nightmare. The number of accidents had skyrocketed, almost as if we were trying to meet a full year's quota of fatalities in one go. I was at my wits' end. First, there was a seemingly impossible explosion. That day, a worker named Leo was tasked with cutting a metal frame on a large panel in one of the workshops. He was a veteran with over 20 years of experience, and this was routine work for him. No one could have imagined something so simple would turn deadly. There was a weld spot he needed to reach, about 6.5 feet up. He didn't want to bother with a ladder, so he just kicked a nearby can over to use as a step stool. But that can, as it turned out, was filled with paint thinner. Flammable, explosive, and volatile, with a flash point of only 77 degrees Fahrenheit. As the sparks from the cutting tool rained down, the inevitable happened. Boom! A massive explosion. Leo was thrown through the air. According to his colleagues who witnessed it, his lower body. It was blown to shreds. Usually, in accidents like this, we advise against immediate rescue attempts. You can't be sure the danger is over, and you risk losing another life. It's a good thing they didn't rush in to help. Because the panel's support frame, weakened by the blast, gave way. It not only fell but came crashing down right where Leo had landed. He might have survived a small explosion, but this multi-ton panel. It crushed his head completely. In the aftermath, we were baffled. How did a container of flammable liquid end up in a sealed cutting zone? We scoured all the security footage, but we couldn't see who brought the can in. We asked everyone on site, but nobody knew where it had come from. It was like it had materialized out of thin air. Utterly bizarre. And just as we were tearing our hair out over Leo's case, something even stranger occurred. In another workshop, there was a liquid nitrogen leak. It was a new liquid nitrogen storage and vaporization system, monitored by a DCS control system. But something went wrong. An operator named Ryan was performing system maintenance when a massive amount of liquid nitrogen began to leak. The gas sprayed directly onto him. And the DCS monitoring system showed the temperature of the liquid nitrogen at that moment was minus 310.4 degrees Fahrenheit. His body was frozen solid in an instant. Ever seen an ice sculpture? It was pretty much like that. And then, as if God wanted to make absolutely sure he was dead, an even crueler twist of fate occurred. The ventilation duct above Ryan suddenly broke. The steel pipe came crashing down, shattering the human ice sculpture into countless pieces. Scattered all over the floor. After the leak was contained, the crew sent to clean up the remains took one look at the melted, gruesome mess on the ground and didn't know where to start. One of them threw up on the spot. Another investigation followed, but again, it led nowhere. At this point, the entire complex shut down for a safety review. But the accidents continued even with the shutdown. The furloughed employees were obviously happy about the break. Some even planned a trip, with a dozen or so renting a minibus to go hiking in the countryside. They got into a car accident. But this accident was also unbelievable. Almost everyone on the bus was completely unharmed, aside from a few girls with minor scrapes. But one guy. He was gone. And the way he died was just incredible. The guy's name was Charlie. He was a big, brawny man, known for his guts. The bus was navigating a bumpy mountain road, passing a section with a steep cliff on one side, when they were hit by a freak rockslide. The weather was perfect, clear skies, sunny, not a cloud in sight. God only knows why rocks started falling from the mountain. It made no sense. The driver, a real pro, managed to keep driving, but the passengers were panicking. Seeing rocks continuously crashing down around the bus, even the bravest heart would start to pound. Someone suggested jumping from the bus to escape. That someone was the ever-brave Charlie. The other side of the road was a grassy slope, which looked like a safe landing. Besides, the bus was already swerving and braking to avoid the rocks. It felt like it was about to tip over any second. And if it did, the outcome could be far worse. In that split second, Charlie made a decisive move. He threw open a window. At that exact moment, an even larger boulder slammed down in front of the bus. The driver yanked the wheel and slammed on the brakes, sending the vehicle skidding sideways. Charlie leaped out. And the result was... he made the jump, and just as he expected, the bus flipped over. But... the flipping bus landed right on top of him. In an instant, he went from a living, breathing, muscular man to a paper-thin smear on the ground. As for his colleagues on the bus, after the initial shock and the bus settling, they realized they were mostly unharmed. Charlie was, without a doubt, gone. Looking back, it's easy to see that jumping was a fatal mistake. But if you put yourself in that moment... At least, his colleagues all agreed that at the time, jumping seemed like the safer bet. If the bus had been hit by any of those rocks, everyone inside could have died. But the outcome was the complete opposite. It was as if fate had set a trap specifically for Charlie, with no intention of harming anyone else. Of all these recent accidents, this last one stuck with me the most. It was this completely illogical incident that made me start to wonder. What if these people were chosen by death itself? I know it sounds unscientific, but once the thought entered my head, I couldn't shake it. If I was right, there had to be a common thread, something that got them all selected by the Grim Reaper. So, during the shutdown, I dug into the personal files of the 3 deceased employees. I even interviewed their closest colleagues at the plant. But aside from their birthdays, they were all born on June 19th. The years were completely different, though, worlds apart. There were no other commonalities. This wasn't Halloween or something. It couldn't be this creepy, right? I was a bit stunned, especially because I was also born on June 19th. Besides, in a complex this large, if you only looked at the month and day of birth, you'd find plenty of people. A dozen, at least. It just didn't make sense. Why would people from all over the country be marked for death just because of their birthday? Or maybe I was overthinking it. Maybe there was no Grim Reaper. Soon, the plant was scheduled to reopen. Production is always the top priority, after all. But, as expected, another accident occurred. It was only the second day back at work. To comply with new environmental regulations, we had implemented an innovative method for processing scrap iron slag. Basically, we got a ball mill. This thing could effectively separate the iron powder from the slag, turning waste into a valuable resource. A ball mill is like a giant, industrial tumble dryer, except the drum is several meters long and incredibly powerful. Scrap metal goes in one end, and fine powder comes out the other. Normally, a machine like this requires 2 people to be present for it to be started. An older guy, Mr. Hughes, who was almost 50, and another colleague were in charge of it. But that day, his colleague had to deal with something urgent and wasn't at the workstation at the scheduled time. Mr. Hughes, with nothing to do, decided to do some maintenance on the ball mill and check for wear and tear. He put up a big under-maintenance sign, cut the power, and crawled inside the machine's drum. Then, the unbelievable happened. The machine quietly powered on by itself. Not only that, but after powering on, it started running. By the time others noticed the under-maintenance machine was spinning, it was already too late. The Mr. Hughes who came out the other end was more like Mr. Stews. The plant, unsurprisingly, shut down again to deal with the aftermath and conduct more reviews. But after Mr. Hughes's incident, I finally found a useful clue. Mr. Hughes had been at the plant for nearly 20 years. While he was technically skilled, he had some character flaws. He was a petty mooch, a frequent drunk, and a lecher. He'd also done something that was so bad his wife took their kid and left him. It caused a huge scandal at the time. About 5 years ago, the plant hired a group of college graduates. Among them was a quiet girl named Jessie. She always wore glasses and a simple work uniform, the kind of person you'd easily lose in a crowd. Maybe because she was from the countryside, she was very introverted. I never saw her get excited about anything. She always had this calm, placid demeanor. But this same quiet, placid girl, just 6 months after starting her job, hanged herself in her dorm room. You have to understand, an accident and a suicide are two completely different things. The management took it very seriously. They did everything they can to comfort her family and invested all their resources into investigating the reason for her suicide. They eventually discovered that the girl was pregnant. But she didn't have a boyfriend and wasn't known to be close with any guys. Whose baby was it? The girl lived in the company dorms, so if she'd had a regular visitor, her roommates would have known. No one had a clue who the father was. Her family were simple country folk. They were already devastated by their daughter's tragic death and didn't want to make a bigger fuss. They just wanted to lay her to rest. In the end, the matter was settled with a large compensation payment. Not long after this, Mr. Hughes was out drinking with his buddies and, while bragging, let something slip. He said that during a long holiday break, the girl had stayed in the dorms to save money on travel. The whole building was nearly empty, and she had a room to herself. Mr. Hughes had snuck into her room in the dark and raped her. Afterwards, he took some pictures to threaten her into not calling the police. The girl was timid and afraid the photos would get out and bring shame on her, so she stayed silent. But a few days later, Mr. Hughes got horny again. Seeing how compliant she was, he used the photos to force himself on her again. This probably happened several times. That, combined with finding out she was pregnant, likely drove her to the breaking point. At first, when Mr. Hughes was telling the story, he was drunk and told it in the third person, as if it was about someone else. But the more his friends listened, the more they felt something was wrong. Especially when he got to the part about her getting pregnant and hanging herself, they all snapped. A couple of them grabbed their beer bottles and smashed them over Mr. Hughes's head. They later reported him to management, and the whole thing blew up. He should have been fired, but he refused to leave, insisting he was just drunk and telling tall tales. He also claimed that with over a decade at the company, he had a permanent contract. He dared them to fire him without solid proof, threatening to take it to the corporate headquarters. Since it was a state-owned enterprise, managers came and went. None of them wanted to get stuck dealing with his mess, so he actually managed to keep his job. But his reputation was in tatters. Still, trying to directly link his death to Jessie seemed like a stretch. The real question was, could Leo, Charlie, and Ryan be connected to Jessie in any way? First, I found out that Leo and Mr. Hughes were very close friends. They were both heavy drinkers, and apparently, they'd hit it off after discovering they shared a birthday at some celebration. They often drank together. So I started digging into Leo. I managed to get my hands on his personal effects. His phone. A phone really can hold a person's darkest secrets. Especially the cloud photo album. I scrolled back through his photo history and, in his cloud storage, I found pictures of Jessie. The indecent kind. Those two disgusting old men. It made my blood boil. It was pretty much an open and shut case that these two scumbags were the ones who drove Jessie to her death. But Charlie and Ryan, the two younger guys, I couldn't find a single bad thing about them, let alone connect them to those two monsters. They hadn't even started working here 5 years ago. I was completely stumped. But I was convinced that the recent string of accidents was Jessie's curse. I felt like I had found the source of it all. 2 weeks ago, Jessie's dorm building was demolished. The building was decades old. After Jessie's suicide, her colleagues gradually became unwilling to live there, and over time, the entire building was abandoned for years. With the company expanding and new employees needing housing, management decided to tear down the old dorm and build a new one. However, while clearing out the building, the workers discovered that only one person's belongings had been left behind. Jessie's. Her inexpensive possessions, clothes, books, daily necessities, had never been collected by her family. They had just sat in that room for all those years. Maybe her vengeful spirit was in there with them. So when her things were cleared out, she finally snapped, taking revenge on the two men who had destroyed her life. I still didn't know why Charlie and Ryan were caught up in it. But it was possible Charlie's death was just a tragic accident, especially since it happened outside the complex. And Ryan's death could be explained away as a system malfunction causing the nitrogen leak. So, having pieced this much together, I was pretty much sold on my theory. Then, I gathered my courage and went to see my boss. His name was Oliver, and he was the one who had promoted me. He even created my current position for me. I risked getting thrown out of his office to share my theory. And he almost did throw me out. But I argued my case, insisting that no one else needed to know. I would find all of Jessie's remaining possessions, and he could authorize me to bring someone in, at a quiet time, to perform a ritual to appease her spirit. It was that simple. The reward? No more accidents at the plant. That was a very tempting offer. Oliver thought for a moment. He was also at his wits' end with one accident after another. If this kept up, he wouldn't be in his position for much longer. So, he agreed. With my boss's approval, things got much easier. I effortlessly checked Jessie's belongings out of the warehouse. I was confident because I knew a spiritual master who was the real deal. Master Lee. I explained the situation to him, and Master Lee agreed to help. Everything proceeded smoothly. Master Lee chose an auspicious date and time. With Oliver's authorization, I mobilized a team from the security department to escort him to the now leveled site of the old dorm building, where he successfully completed the cleansing ritual. However, he mentioned that while the ritual was complete, something felt off. He gave me a protective talisman and told me to be careful and call him if anything happened. I didn't think much of it at the time. Soon, the plant reopened once again. With the string of recent accidents fresh in everyone's minds, the workers were exceptionally careful. Safety was their top priority. The first day, nothing. The second and third days were also uneventful. I let out a sigh of relief. The way Oliver looked at me was brighter. But on the fourth day, trouble struck again. Seriously, I had never imagined someone could die the way this guy, Lee, did. It's a scenario that's basically impossible to replicate. First, you need to take a plastic drink bottle and fill it with a highly corrosive solvent. Then, place that bottle in the break room of a hot, sweaty welding workshop. Finally, you need a chump like Lee, who, parched from the heat, would burst in, grab the bottle, and chug the entire thing without even noticing the taste was off. After completing these steps, he stumbled into the bathroom, locked the door, pulled down his pants, and sat on the toilet. And never got up again. I don't know if he was able to go, but I heard. His internal organs were so thoroughly corroded that they melted into a viscous liquid and, thanks to gravity, flowed right out of his anus. Needless to say, I skipped dinner that night after hearing that. I was completely baffled. If it wasn't Jessie, then what the hell was going on here? Could it be that these were all just freak accidents? Honestly, that solvent has a powerful, foul smell. I don't think anyone on Earth could chug a whole bottle of it. So, I still didn't believe it was an accident. There had to be some mysterious force guiding all of this. Like the Grim Reaper. And so, I started a new investigation. I began focusing on the timeline. I wanted to know what had opened this Pandora's box and plunged our entire complex into such a dangerous state. I checked the history of fatal accidents at the plant and found that before Leo's death, the last one had been over 6 months prior. So, Leo was definitely the starting point for this series of grim events. Leo's accident was on the 7th of this month. I immediately looked into what major events had occurred at our plant before the 7th. The biggest thing was the demolition and reconstruction project, which included tearing down that women's dorm where Jessie had lived. Actually, demolishing the dorm wasn't a standalone project. Management wouldn't make a big fuss over a single building. It was part of a larger plan to tear down and rebuild a huge section of the northern part of the complex, including 2 old workshops, a residential area, and more. Maybe, in one of these areas, we had accidentally disturbed something we shouldn't have. To figure it out, I spent some time schmoozing my way into the reconstruction management team, taking them out for drinks and meals, and asking a lot of questions. Finally, I heard something strange. Underneath one of the old workshops in the North District, when they broke through the floor, they dug up a stone tablet. The tablet was covered in strange patterns. The manager in charge of the demolition said it looked ancient, and he was worried it might be classified as a historical artifact. If that happened, not only would the reconstruction be halted, but we might even lose the land itself. So, they didn't report the discovery. Instead, they hushed it up, and that very night, they had the tablet hauled away, smashed to pieces, and thrown into the river. I was shocked when I heard this. These guys, they didn't even know what the tablet was, and they dared to dispose of it so recklessly? I had a gut feeling that our current troubles were because of this thing. Fortunately, they had taken a picture of it. After much pestering, I finally got my hands on a photo of the tablet. It was a circular stone slab, probably about 6 or 7 feet in diameter. It was less a tablet and more like a large, stone disc. And the carvings on it. Even though they were caked with dirt, I could clearly see the overall design was a bagua, an 8-sided diagram from Taoist cosmology. But unlike a normal bagua, between the 8 trigrams and the central yin-yang symbol, there were countless other strange patterns. They looked like talismans. Just looking at it made me feel uneasy. I took the photo and went back to Master Li. He finally gave me a name for the stone disc. An evil suppressing 8 trigrams formation. Master Li was also surprised. He said you don't normally see these. If one shows up, it means there's something incredibly evil that needs to be suppressed. The crucial part is, if you need a formation this powerful, it means the evil entity can only be suppressed, not destroyed or driven away. I quickly asked if he knew what was being suppressed there. The master admitted that he wasn't powerful enough when he was on site for the cleansing, he had only felt a vague sense of dread, but he couldn't pinpoint the problem. However, he said that even evil entities have reasons for killing. He told me to first investigate the history of that piece of land. He would also help me research the components of this specific 8 trigrams formation and the conditions for its suppression. If necessary, he could consult his own master, and then we could figure out a solution. I didn't waste a second and went to find out. It was easy to look up the history of the land the plant was built on. Before it was incorporated into the city, it belonged to a small county, and the Housing and Construction Bureau records clearly stated its former use. A labor camp. This wasn't like any kind of correctional facility we know today. Its main purpose was to detain and re-educate suspects. This re-education through labor was a flawed system, a system with terrifyingly broad powers. It could sentence people without a trial and send them to a labor camp for up to 4 years of forced labor, confinement, and ideological indoctrination. Because of its flaws, the system was abolished in 20, but this particular labor camp wasn't shut down because the system was abolished. After all, our plant has been here for over 20 years. This labor camp was closed and abandoned because everyone inside it died. That's right. I had stumbled upon a horrifying historical event. On June 19, 1995, everyone at this labor camp suddenly died overnight. Seeing that date sent a shiver down my spine. That was the birthday of the other victims. And, of course, my birthday. But I still didn't understand the connection. I pulled some strings and eventually found an old man who used to manage the county's historical records. After a long visit and much discussion, he revealed what had happened back then. On the morning of June 19, 1995, when officials arrived at the labor camp for a routine check-in, they received no response. They reported it to the local police. At that time, the camp had dormitories, and staff members who weren't on leave would typically stay overnight. When the police broke in, they found that all 13 staff members had committed suicide in bizarre and grotesque ways. Led by the warden, a man named Peter, they had all died together in the conference room. Some had hanged themselves, some had bashed their heads against the wall, others had slit their own throats or wrists. One had even managed to choke himself to death. That last one was physically impossible. A person can't strangle themselves. But the only fingerprints on his neck were his own, and there was no sign of anyone else being near him. Meanwhile, the dozens of inmates were completely unharmed. They didn't even know that something so terrible had happened the night before. The authorities launched an investigation, and the old man was part of the team. But they couldn't find any evidence of an intruder, so they ruled all the deaths as suicides. Although they found no signs of murder, they did uncover a dark secret. The staff at this labor camp had been systematically abusing the inmates, taking bribes, and even committing murder. For example, they would openly quote prices to the inmates: how much to get out of labor, how much to shorten their sentence, and even how much for an immediate release. They also had a sinister arrangement with people on the outside. Since the labor camp system didn't require a trial, if someone paid them enough, they could have an enemy arrested and brought in. Once inside, the person would be beaten, tortured, or even killed during labor, their death disguised as an infectious disease. The family was never notified, the body never returned. They were just buried in the barren hills behind the camp. The old man and his team dug up over 50 bodies from those hills. So, those 13 staff members got what they deserved. But the question remained, who, or what, had killed them? The old man was hesitant to say more, only that they immediately shut down the camp, transferred the remaining inmates, and leveled all the buildings. And that was the end of it. Hearing all this, I pretty much understood. I pulled out the photo of the evil suppressing 8 trigrams formation and showed it to the old man. His eyes widened, and he nervously asked me where I got the picture. I told him everything that had been happening at the plant recently. The old man slapped his thigh and muttered, "What a tragedy." Then, with trembling lips, he told me what he had held back. The formation was indeed their doing. Because the investigation team had discovered the cause of the staff's suicides. Ghost possession. The lonely, vengeful souls of those murdered inmates had gathered their strength and taken revenge on the labor camp staff. But even after their revenge was complete, their spirits didn't dissipate. Filled with rage, these malevolent ghosts wanted only to harm the living. They were extremely dangerous. The team had no choice but to seek help from a powerful spiritual master. The master told them that the ghosts had become earthbound spirits, permanently tied to that specific area. They couldn't be driven away, and they were nearly impossible to exorcise. In the end, the master could only create the 8 trigrams formation and bury it underground to suppress them, then have the entire site leveled and abandoned. He never imagined that one day, the formation would be dug up. I quickly asked where that master was now, but the old man said he had passed away years ago. This was a huge problem. Even though I now knew the cause of everything, it was useless without a solution. Armed with the truth, I had no choice but to go back to the less powerful but well-meaning Master Lee. After hearing the whole story, he said that if it was just a group of earthbound spirits from the hills, it wasn't too big of a problem. A regional suppression ritual would work. It didn't have to be an exact replica of the original formation. He also said that while his own abilities were limited, he had a master. I was overjoyed and immediately begged him to ask his master for help. Master Lee said it was no problem. I went back to Oliver, my face thick with shame. After getting an earful, I managed to pull out the photo of the stone disc. This time, even Oliver was stunned. His attitude softened, but he was still hesitant, until I laid out everything I had discovered. I got his approval once again. This time, the security team was baffled. Master Lee and his master showed up with several disciples, carrying huge rolls of yellow cloth. It was quite a spectacle, and they chose high noon as the auspicious time. The public isn't blind. A crowd quickly gathered to watch. At the spot where the stone disc had been unearthed, the master and his apprentice began a ceremony. The disciples, following orders, spread the large yellow cloths on the ground in all directions. They were giant, oversized talismans. At this point, even a ghost would know what we were up to. The process was nerve-wracking, but it got done. According to Master Lee and his master, they had successfully cast a suppression spell over the area. The earthbound spirits that were once buried there could never come out to cause trouble again. I finally let out a huge sigh of relief. This has to be over, right? 2 days later, Oliver held a company-wide meeting to rally everyone for the reopening. After all, plenty of people had seen us performing the ritual, and with so many deaths in the past month, it was time to calm everyone's nerves. I started living each day on edge. But for the next full week, not a single accident occurred in the entire complex. The weight on my shoulders finally lifted. Thank God. The problem was finally solved. Although, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had missed something. But it didn't matter, as long as the bizarre accident stopped. And because I'd handled such a dangerous job, I spent the next few days doing nothing but hanging out in Oliver's office, drinking his tea. Of course, I was mainly there to keep an eye on things. As the head of safety, Oliver would be the first to know if anything went wrong. Another week passed, and the plant remained free of any strange incidents. The storm had passed. Oliver was becoming more and more cheerful. But then I finally remembered what I had missed. A date. June 19th. The reason I remembered was that as I was nervously monitoring the plant, Oliver said, "Alex, your birthday is coming up, isn't it?" It hit me then. June 19th was almost here. I pulled out the files of everyone who had died recently and realized. Mr. Hughes, his birthday was also June 19th. Different year, of course. This was strange, and I didn't know what it meant. Years ago, on June 19th, the ghosts from the barren hills swarmed out and killed all 13 of their tormentors at the labor camp. Then they were suppressed. And now, years later, these vengeful spirits were released, and they started targeting and killing people born on June 19th. Why only kill people with that specific birthday? The logic just didn't feel right. I wanted to talk to Oliver about it, but he was incredibly busy. The demolition and reconstruction of the North District was his pet project, and my investigations had already caused significant delays. He had a lot to deal with. Finally, the 19th arrived. I was in Oliver's office again, drinking his tea, terrified something would happen at the plant. "It's a good day," Oliver said. "Thanks," I replied, "but I'm not really one for birthdays. No gifts, please. Just give me a raise." Oliver chuckled and opened a fresh tin of high-grade tea. Just then, my phone rang. It was Master Lee. He first asked how things were at the plant. I told him everything was fine and that I'd visit him and his master soon to properly thank them. But that wasn't why he was calling. "Alex," he said, "my master told me this morning he senses something is off at your location. Today is the 19th, the day the earthbound spirits were unleashed, but the formation we set up shows no activity at all." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It could mean that the spirits causing trouble at your plant were never those ghosts from the hills. Perhaps they found peace after their revenge and moved on. I was stunned. So, we might not have suppressed anything at all? Master Lee confirmed. I quickly said I would keep investigating and hung up. I looked up and met Oliver's eyes. I was about to tell him I needed to leave and look into this further, but he just waved his hand, telling me to calm down. I'm being transferred, he said. My work here is done. I was shocked. The reconstruction has barely started. Most of it hasn't even been torn down yet. How can your work be done? He looked at me and smiled. You know my full name is Oliver, right? Do you know what my father did for a living? Huh? I said, confused about where this was going. He continued, a strange interest in his voice. My father was the warden of a local labor camp. He died in the line of duty. I was only about 10 at the time, but I remember he loved me very, very much. He doted on me. I froze. Oliver went on. For years, he's come to me in my dreams, telling me he's trapped here, that he's in pain, that he wants to be set free. And the only way to free him is to let him out and offer him a substitute, a scapegoat. Then he can finally move on. The scapegoat has to meet at least one condition, he said. Their birthday has to be the same as the day he died. Each day has its own unique aura. Their energies have to align for him to be able to take them as a substitute. My mind went completely blank. I couldn't believe it. Oliver's father was the warden of that evil labor camp. He chuckled to himself. Why do you think I was so obsessed with this demolition and reconstruction project? I didn't know where that 8 trigrams formation was, so I had to dig up the whole area. And those guys who found the stone disc, you think they would have dared to smash it and throw it in the river? Not without my approval. I shot to my feet, staring at Oliver, the man who hired me, the man who created a position just for me. He ignored me, continuing his monologue. You almost figured it out a couple of times. I was a little worried, I'll admit. But you never truly understood what was happening, so I let you bring in your spiritualists and perform your rituals. It was the perfect way to keep you, and everyone else, calm. He gave an awkward smile, looking thoughtful. Still, just to be safe, I told them to hold off. I made them wait until today to strike. I guess I'm just too cautious. A cold dread washed over me. I knew why he was telling me all this. He had already won. Finally, he sneered. Why do you think I hired you? Why do you think I created a whole new position just for you? Because there weren't enough people here with the right birthday. To get the numbers up, I had to bring one in myself. Like you. I knew I was in deep trouble. I turned and ran, bolting out of the office. I had to get as far away from this area as possible. But it was probably already too late. Oliver's voice followed me down the hall. It's useless. Today is their day of remembrance, and it's your birthday. Your auras are aligned. They'll be more vicious than ever. It all ends today. I scrambled down the corridor, but then I saw it. Out of the corner of my eye, a pane of glass from a nearby window suddenly popped loose. I was running too fast. It fell in a way that defied gravity, spinning horizontally like a frisbee, flying right at me. In that moment, I tried with all my might to stop. But my upper body still went flying. I fell to the ground and looked back to see. My lower half stumbled 2 more steps before collapsing. As it fell, I could see Oliver standing in the doorway of his office. All hope drained out of me. I couldn't even scream. He was smiling, a look of profound relief on his face, as if he had just completed a momentous task. And I saw it then, a faint, translucent figure that looked just like him, slowly fading away at his side. I closed my eyes, my mind filled with a desperate longing for the world I was leaving behind. And, of course, a burning resentment. I was so unwilling to die, so unwilling to let it end like this. Just before I lost consciousness, I felt a searing heat on my chest. And then I realized. It was the protective talisman Master Li had given me. I had completely forgotten about it, thinking it was useless. But it wasn't. I could feel it, protecting me, or at least trying to keep my soul from being scattered to the wind. My consciousness suddenly became crystal clear. Decades ago, a group of evil men at a labor camp had murdered countless innocent people for their own gain. Those innocent people became vengeful ghosts, exacting a terrible revenge and trapping their tormentors here, to suffer for all eternity. And now, the tragedy had repeated itself. My boss, Oliver, for his own selfish desires, for the sake of his father's soul, had murdered even more innocent people. I don't know if those who died will have the chance to become vengeful spirits and seek their own revenge. But I will. This is a cycle of retribution. Don't ever think you can harm others and get away with it. What goes around, comes around. It always does. My consciousness faded, but I knew I would wake up again. With great effort, I finally opened my eyes. I had escaped from the talisman. I was back in Oliver's office. He was sitting peacefully at his desk. Of course, he couldn't see me. On his desk lay 2 documents, one a formal reprimand, the other an order for his transfer. He didn't seem to care. He leaned down and pulled a tin of expensive tea from a drawer. I looked at the reflective surface of the computer monitor on his desk. My own reflection was there, too. Inside the screen. He was brewing tea. I was smiling.